In the annals of human history, has so few done so much so often to hurt so many? They want to take it all. Everything that you own, everything that you ever had or ever hoped to have, they're not planning on taking away. There is a war against you, your children. They will send your sons and daughters into a war for the world. Not to free it, but to enslave it. Not to bring you into a state of liberty, but to bring you into a prison with or without walls. I started on this campaign putting out the Illuminati CFR records with Myron Fagan. There wasn't any discussion of this. Illuminati. There wasn't any discussion about the Council on Foreign Relations, but I will assure you that this Evilarchy, which orchestrates this war against us, is coming out of 58 East 68th Street in New York City. Communism is not a creation of the masses to overthrow the banking establishment. It's a creation of the banking establishment to overthrow and enslave the masses. That's what it is. But we have something today that has never happened in this country before. It's a legitimate alliance between the left and the right. They can defeat either one, but they cannot defeat us joined together. They want to reduce the population of the planet. They want to keep you entertained. They want to keep you looking this way while something is happening over here. They want your attention. They want to bring you over in this direction while they're coming over from here. Don't turn your back on them. The abomination. Oh, he's the bankster's boy. The bankster's boy. He's not just on his knees before them to shine their shoes. Geithner, Bernanke, members of the Council on Foreign Relations, members of the Trilateral Commission, the chief advisor to the President of the United States is from the Skull and Bones. Gary Richard Arnold, who's going to be here. He's sitting over there. The guy that looks like Lenin, talks like Lincoln. Our campaign was against the President of the United States, not because he was a conservative and politically right, but because he was a counterfeit conservative and politically left. I was the first guy in the country to put out bumper stickers for this guy. Run, Ronnie, run. I thought he was going to take us out of the desert into the promised land. But he wasn't taking us out of the desert into the promised land. He appointed a fellow named George Herbert Walker Bush, who stepped out of the coffin at the Skull and Bones. His name was Magog, that's what they called him. Magog in the Bible is that man who wages war against God in the final days of the earth. His son, laid in the same coffin, was born again into the same satanic order. They want to own the world. And they're going to have to kill you. Whatever paper currency you have, you must convert that paper into gold, into silver, into guns, into food, into lead. Because that will be of value. The dope traffic in this country, it isn't to make monies for the guys in the hood. It's to control you. They want you like puppets on a string. Oh, the presidential puppet? He was performing his thing the other day. And he was reading from the teleprompter. And he reads very good until the teleprompter came to a close. And he was just stunned. He didn't have the words that they put into his mouth. He can't speak on his own. He's reading from a, I don't want to say the word, script. He's scripted. He's controlled. He's a puppet. He is bringing you down the garden path. It's not the yellow brick road to see the Wizard of Oz. He's bringing you into the death camps. I did a thing with Russian television about 3 months ago on concentration camps in America. Russian television was here to run a story on concentration camps in America. If David Rockefeller to become president of the United States, it would be a demotion. This Gary Richard Arnold guy that I managed spent $5,000 in the campaign. $5,000. Refused every offer we had to go to the White House. We ran a campaign against the counterfeit conservatives. We have a one-party system. It doesn't represent the political left and political right. It represents the political wrong. They've got you conned. Gary Richard Arnold took on the President of the United States, the first one in the history of this country to do so in the White House. And it made some sort of news, which you will see right here, right now, with Gary Richard Arnold. This is on Crossfire.
Crossfire. In the crossfire, Gary Arnold.
There's hardly a campaign manager or briefing book that would recommend it, but if it's instant notoriety you want, national newspaper exposure, your name plastered across the screen, one politician's apparently found a way. Somehow get the President of the United States to tell you to shut up. And you're on your way. At the very moment 41-year-old Gary Richard Arnold elicited that now famous scolding, he hit the publicity jackpot. Cameras chased him, papers pasted his picture front page, and he even got invited on the big TV shows like NBC's Today. And when this nationally unknown California Republican congressional candidate thereafter held his own news conference at the stately National Press Club Forum for Presidents and Kings, you had to pry your way in to hear what he had to say, which was basically the same as what he said the other day.
Nobody that would say the things that he does would do the things that he's doing. There are two Ronald Reagans. I agree with the Ronald Reagan of what he says. I agree with 85–90% of what he says, and I disagree with 85 or 90% of what he does. It's as simple as that.
Old Shut Up, as Arnold's come to be known, is truly a political maverick.
As you probably know, the history of the Council on Foreign Relations, it was formed in Paris in 1919.
Gary Richard Arnold. Please give him a hand. Gary, come on up.
Yeah, I'm sorry that Mr. Tom Campbell or Mr. Posner was up here to debate Mr. Hilder. The two senators from the state of California right now is Dianne Feinstein, who's a member of the Trilateral Commission that Dr. Monteith talked about, and this very powerful organization that just controls the monetary systems of World Bank one after another. They succeed each other, whether they're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't make any difference. The chairs are the same. It's musical chairs what they're doing. They're getting the dummies in the street to argue back and forth, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, while they continue to consolidate. The other state senator is Barbara Baxter, who is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. We go back in history, had Mr. Huffington ran for United States Senator in the Republican Party. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Another man that was nominated by the Republican Party was Matt Fong. He was involved with receiving red Chinese money, like the state senator from Santa Cruz, Bruce McPherson. Bruce McPherson is the son of a family that owned an independent newspaper called the Santa Cruz Sentinel. In fact, it was during my campaign in which that paper changed hands. We discovered that Mr. Richardson Dillsworth, that runs Rockefeller Family Associates, who is a member of Skull and Bones. He has a couple of floors in New York City in which they manage all the various facets of the Rockefeller family power. And they had hired an outfit called Hawk International to do an investigation of me because I had called for an investigation that trilateralism was the issue. And we had an honest reporter at that particular newspaper. He was a socialist, but he understood the copy, and we got the information, we got front page there continually also. He was approached by Hawk International, an outfit I found out later that was had connections with the Treasury Department and was wanting to ship automatic weapons to Central America. This is a nice little Santa Cruz. It turns out the reporter gave me a call. There was an afternoon paper at that time. I still have the note they put on my door. The house was broken into, and a lot of other things that were going on. They hassle people quite thoroughly. He says, we know who's been investigating you. He says, we're going banner headline. Do you have any comment? And he told me about the, the Rockefeller involvement. And I said, well, that's fine. I've got a file on Rockefeller, too. He says, we're going banner headlines tomorrow. It was an afternoon paper. I got a call, and I've got that saved, too, on a little cassette tape. He says, well, the new boys upstairs, they spiked the story. It was bought out by the Wall Street Journal, Ottawa News Services out of Canada. The same thing what they did with the Texas Corridor. All those newspapers that were supporting the people, opposing the Texas Corridor, and the treason highway inside the United States, all those little papers were bought out. So who's ahead of the Dow Jones? We find it's Peter Kahn. He's Bilderberger, member of the Council on Foreign Relations. His wife is Karen House. She's in charge of the international Dow Jones News branch of it. And the name House should make ring a bell to people that have been studying conspiracies. There was a man by the name of Colonel House that advised Wilson. And he was the one behind the advice for the Federal Reserve, the graduated income tax, the foundations that protect the rich, the direct election of senators, which is very, very important because the direct election of senators took away your state's rights to checks and balances. It made it a popular election so the newspapers could get the people moving in one way or another. Instead of the state legislatures, like it used to be, would select 2 representatives to represent the state. It was a compartmentalization, the genius of the Constitution, the checks and powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, in states and counties and cities that kept the tyranny and kept these tyrants from doing where they've gotten to today. But this was Colonel House. He wrote a blueprint just like Hitler did. His was in fiction form. He didn't put his name to it until later. And it was entitled Philip Drew, Administrator. And he talks about a dictatorship. By the way, this is a free download on the internet. It's very valuable to read their plan because you can see what's going on. And that plan included our Agenda 21, UN governance, the stealing, the battle line that's going on in your very cities, not just at the international level where they've stole $10.8 trillion within the last 8 months. And I just don't understand why there aren't people out there with the pitchforks.
Gary is talking about the property pirates. They're taking your homes. They're taking your land. They're taking your businesses. They don't carry swords like the buccaneers of old. They don't take over your ship from a rowboat in Somalia. They're taking away your property through red tag terrorism, land grabbing. Not one home, but millions of homes. Talking to these girls from the UK over there yesterday about the television cameras. Not one that's in town, but several. Everywhere you go. In fact, there's more surveillance in London than in any other city in the world. Orwell's book, 1984, was written in the BBC in a little closet type room. It is Big Brotherment. The cameras are on you. You're on camera 200 times within 1 hour. I didn't even think people could get around to 200 places in 1 hour. There is nothing that is private. They can go into your bank account, they can go into your home. This is the rape and robbery of this republic. Most people don't even know it. People go up and they say, I pledge allegiance to the democracy of the United States. No, it's not a democracy. It's a constitutional republic which allows minorities to exist. I am not in favor of the United Nations. I would like to see a disunited nations where you have the right to say, screw you, to Uncle Sam. Oh, and Uncle Sam, he's pointing out there with the beard, and you see all of the hairs, the goat-like face. Uncle Sam, the image, the symbol of this country, is taken from the goat of Baphomet, the satanic goat of Baphomet, half man, half woman, and the nipples on the breast, one happens to be the cufflink on the shirt of Uncle Sam. The configuration of the hat, which flanges out, is the same configuration of the curvature in the horns of Satan. Uncle Sam is saying, I want you. I want to send your child to war. I want you to serve Uncle Sam. I want you to serve Satan.
The policies have been steeped in occultism. You look at the turn of the century, you had William Howard Taft, who was a member of the Skull and Bones Society. It was the 9/11, the Spanish-Cuban Maine being blown up in Cuba, that created the war with the American people. We then took their Philippines, we took Cuba, we took Puerto Rico. In fact, Mr. Taft was governor of both of those, both Cuba and the Philippines. He ended up as president. He ended up as Supreme Court Justice. Howard Taft IV today has been working under George W. Bush, for the Law of the Sea Treaty, wanting to put the oceans under the United Nations command. Leon Panetta, who I ran against in 1982 and is today your head of the CIA, was co-chairman of the Pew Commission, Pew meaning sun oil. His other co-chairman was David Rockefeller Jr. So the family's real small. You don't need a big program to see what's going on. You can see what the newspapers are doing by the total line. While we have the internet and the DVDs, we're winning that war. We just need to do more. The World War I, after the bloodshed and the imperialism of taking over Cuba and the Philippines, World War I, we had a Secretary of War. His name was Henry Stimson. He, too, was a member of Skull and Bones, known in the 1800s as the Brotherhood of Death. Now, you need to get your pencil out because this is free, or you can buy it hard copy. I'd recommend it. Stan's got a copy of America's Secret Establishment, written by Dr. Anthony Sutton. He worked over here at Stanford. He put a trilogy out on the transfer of technology to the Soviet Union from the revolution up until the late 60s. And he discovered that 80% of their ships were built in the West. He went on and on reviewing all the various industries. They are us, just as we've built Red China, just as Kissinger went over there, just as George Bush, Skull and Bones, was the first ambassador to Red China. We had Averell Harriman, ambassador to the Soviet Union. We had Prescott Bush, together with Averell Harriman and other members of Skull and Bones, finance both the Soviet Revolution and Nazi Germany.
Us. The Homeland Security Act is the same as the Enabling Act, which was passed by the Reichstag.
The advisors for Homeland Security included members from Stasi and the KGB, Primakov, and I can't think of the second name, but pure, unadulterated terror. The person in charge of all the intelligence agencies or training people for intelligence agencies around the world today was the longest sitting chairman of the Senate Financial Committee, and that was David Boren. He's a member of Skull and Bones. He wrote the law, he retired, put the training of Interpol and all these different organizations over to the University of Oklahoma, and guess who's the president of Oklahoma University? Skull and Bones, David Boren. These people cheat, they lie, they kill. The poison that was sent over to Czechoslovakia, one country that where the head of it doesn't believe in global warming and doesn't like the European Union, tested their vaccines on live animals, and every one of them died. That vaccine was made by Baxter International. You punch around on the internet and you'll find Baxter International was run for decades by a man by the name of Lukes, L-O-U-C-K-S Jr. Remember Skull and Bones. And then we find out that it was Baxter that financed Rumsfeld's first congressional election back in the 60s. This all ties together. We find that this member of the Skull and Bones was a director of the Kellogg Foundation, and I heard eugenics shouted out the other day, I think when Mr. Tarpley was talking. And Kellogg's is, you go to their website today, they're proud that they are responsible for fluoridating Central and South America, 350 million people down there.
But that fluoride was very successful. I mean, Adolf Hitler used it. He didn't have to use as many guards in the prison camps.
Anthony mentioned Ronald Wilson Reagan. I ran for other offices and won contested primaries, one for state assembly and one for state senate. In Congress, we won that one too. During those two races, Reagan was governor. I got his endorsement. He got to his governorship through a speech called A Time for Choosing. It was a wonderful speech, and I passed many of them out there. As soon as he was elected, he put in all of the Rockefeller boys. He put in the Mumford Act, which was the first gun control. He started to regionalize the state of California, right on down the line. It was total treason. And by looking at his record, it turns out that for 12 years he was on the letterhead of the United World Federalists. That should have given us a clue. That was run by Cord Meyer, and he worked for the intelligence agencies. He had a grandfather by the name of Pinchot, which was a member of Skull and Bones. He was a close friend of Bradley and Tom Braden, who was interviewing me on that Crossfire. Tom Braden was part of the British Army, the OSS, and later the CIA. He was connected with Operation Monarch, in which they wanted to, the CIA and the intelligence agencies wanted to control the major newspapers throughout the United States, and that's the way it has been. For years, I always thought that third world countries had to do with military dictatorships and this type of stuff going on.
The CIA is the enforcement arm of the CFR. That's the Council on Foreign Relations, originally called the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Guys, why don't you go up there on stage and...
Yeah, the reason the League of Nations was supposed to be their foundation for their New World Order, and the United States Senate voted it down. So they had a problem, and they put together the Institute for International Affairs, as Anthony was saying, and they thought, well, if they bring it over to the United States, Royal Affairs didn't sound like it would go along with Americans. So they named it the Council on Foreign Relations and incorporated it in 1921. And there, incorporating it was Allen Dulles, who later became head of the CIA.
And they openly admit that their goal is global government. They operate this thing called the NAU, North American Union. It's the Nazi Agreement. Adolf Hitler's second book was called what? The World Order. The New World Order. And it's Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer, one world, one race, one religion. Oh, they want to run one race, yes. But you're going to have to eliminate some of those people they consider useless eaters. On the back of the dollar bill at the top, it's the eye of Horus, the eye of Lucifer. Is this thing a Luciferian conspiracy? People say, oh, no, 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 don't say that. Don't, you know, we can't get into that thing. Well, Uncle Sam is Lucifer. And Uncle Sam is bringing your guys over there. I talked to the mother of Pat Tillman, whose son had finally woken up, and then somebody gave the assignment for him to die. Friendly fire? Hell no, it's not friendly fire. Somebody said, kill that guy. And he was.
I'm going to grab that right there with Gordon Gray. Recently we're talking about a Supreme Court potential appointee. There's another one that's the Chief of the Supreme Court, Mr. Roberts. His landing that particular job, his coach on that was C. Boyden Gray. He's the son of Gordon Gray. Gordon Gray was a very powerful individual. His brother put together the Operational Naval Intelligence. He himself owned R.J. Reynolds. He put out a handbook on assassinations that even the Contras tore out pages of it because they recommended hiring assassins to kill some of your own people to provide for martyrs. Now his son, C. Boyden Gray, belongs to a law firm involved in all kinds of global government programs. Mr. Roberts' wife also belongs to a law firm that is totally involved in international organizations working against the United States very clearly. There's a couple of organizations I want you to remember tonight because you won't normally see them in the books that we have out here. One is called the 10 Organization Schools. It's a system of schools in New England that provide people for the New World Order, for the trainees. You punch that up and you'll find that each and every time these people will appear. It happens time after time. There's another organization called McKinsey Company. They have 43,000 members. They provided the advice to Tony Blair as to who to appoint to his cabinet. It's basically, it's an organization with the most Rhodes Scholars in the world. They advise, they're in 43 countries. They're basically a intelligence operation. The recent governor of Louisiana, which is being promoted as a presidential candidate, is both a Rhodes Scholar and a member from the McKinsey organization. But those two organizations will give you a better view of what's happening and going on. When Anthony was talking about Hitler's second book, The World Order, during the 40s, there was a book written by a congressman, a Democratic congressman in Orange County. And he was concerned, he was talking about why the major companies in the United States were working with Hitler on post-war development. And he was worried about the cartelization of Europe, is what he talks about it in this book. The man is Jerry Voorhees. The opposition, the defeat of him, was done by Prescott Bush. Came out with the bankers, selected Richard Nixon to run against him. Because in this book here, he attacks the Bank of International Settlements, on and on. But it's an absolutely amazing book that's talking about everything we're talking about.
Lenin and Trotsky was funded out of New York City. Kuhn-Loeb Company, $20 million in gold. They were trained on the Esso oil refinery plant over in Jersey. The Mensheviks. They were stopped by the British, and then Colonel Edward Mandell House convinced Wilson to let them go. And they met up with Lenin. They went through the heart of Germany during the heat of the war to foment the Soviet Revolution. And Adolf Hitler made a statement that I believe, that was on February 5th, 1941, in a book called The Road to Serfdom. The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek. And I'm not too sure of the page whether it's 163, but in a footnote there, he's got the statement by Adolf Hitler. And it says, basically, National Socialism, which is Nazism, and Marxism are the same. The whole of National Socialism is based on it. National Socialism is not on the political right. National Socialism is with Marxism on the political left. It is financial fascism, cashism as I call it, operated by and through the Federal Reserve.
The important formula. You'll never figure anything out until you understand the formula that Anthony gave you earlier on, that the communism doesn't come from the people. It doesn't come from Moscow or Peiping or Cuba. It comes from Wall Street, London. It's a device. Communism is a tool of the bankers to enslave the people. We've got a publication that we printed. It looks very much like it's in support of Ronald Reagan. This is 1982 for a $1,000 plate dinner that was sponsored by son of the communist founder of the American Communist Party.
And I want to say one thing, Gary. We've got a picture of Ronald Wilson Reagan on the desk of Armand Hammer, whose father formed the Communist Party in this country. You say, well, that's, we know that. But what's unique on the desk, right next to Ronald Reagan, is a picture of Nikolai Lenin. Lenin, who headed the communist movement, and Ronald Reagan, whose vice president's father supported Adolf Hitler through Brown Brothers Harriman. We still have in Washington, D.C., the statue of General Albert Pike, who says, yes, Lucifer is God. I want to destroy the statue of General Albert Pike in Washington, D.C. The Council on Foreign Relations at 58 East 68th Street in New York City. The Club of Rome, the Brotherhood of Death. And the Georgia Guidestones, and it's on our poster. And the Georgia Guidestones is sort of like America's Stonehenge. And they're suggesting the reduction of the world's population to about 1/2 billion. So what happens to the other 6 billion of us? We need to change the attitude of 1 billion people on Earth. And that's not impossible. Gary's attack against Ronald Reagan in the White House resulted, according to CBS News Central, in more publicity than the rest of the House of Representatives combined. If two guys can do that with a $5,000 budget, you guys can change the world.
Yeah, the first head of the Federal Reserve was a man by the name of Pierre Jay. Again, a member of Skull and Bones. The movie, The Good Shepherd, I don't know how many people have seen that. It's worthwhile. You get a little bit of flavor of it. It talks about Deer Island, shows some of their rituals. But what's reversed on it, they've got the hero or the main character looking out for our national sovereignty, when in fact everything they do is to destroy national sovereignty and create a world government. From 1928 to 1940, the head of the Federal Reserve System is a man by the name of George L. Harrison, according to the Wiki report. And again, he went to Yale and became Skull and Bones. He was assistant to Henry Stimson, who was Skull and Bones. Henry Stimson wasn't only the Secretary of War for World War I, but he was Secretary of War for World War II. As I mentioned earlier, the First War was designed to create the League of Nations, and the Senate voted it down. The Second World War was designed to create the United Nations, right up here in San Francisco. The first acting Secretary General of the United Nations was a Council on Foreign Relations member. You might know, heard of the name Alger Hiss. and he was convicted as a Soviet traitor. And they used the communism in order to create NATO, which has turned into to the world's army, basically.
I don't want to see public education. I want to see public education destroyed. Public education is public education. What the government teaches is slanted. What the government gets, it must first take away. What it takes away, it must take away with force or threat of force, violence or threat of violence. If they're going to teach you something, you can be damn well sure that it is in concert with the thinking of these banking bastards who want to rule the world. We should have separation of state and education. Why would we give our monies to them to teach our children and tell them how to think and what to do? Why would you give away your monies to them through the second plank of the Communist Manifesto, which is the income tax? To them, to change your thinking, to change your mind, to create a world that is united. See, if you've got a united world, you can't say, stop the world, I want to get off. There's no way to go. You will be in a cage if you do not think politically correct. You will be politically abolished. The old, the infirm, was it Margaret Sanger has this ZPG, that's zero population growth. She was a close advisor of a fellow named Adolf Hitler. If they financed Hitler, they financed Stalin.
Right now, with the propaganda on the recent appointee or potential appointee of Sonia Sotomayor, she's portrayed as a left-winger. I got a copy of Accuracy in Media today, which was founded by Reed Irvine. You'll find on themuckraker.net, we've got a series of articles between Anthony and myself on counterfeit conservatives, and we addressed Reed Irvine, who used to work for the Federal Reserve. Anyway, Sonia Sotomayor is being promoted as somebody from the left. Her first involvement with the international community was a Third World Center funded by the Ford Foundation. And out there you'll find with Mr. Monteith's display there, he's got a book on foundations. The executive director of the Ford Foundation said that their purpose was to so alter the United States that it could comfortably merge with the Soviet Union. That's the Ford Foundation. ACLU, by the way, Mr. Romero is a member of the council, the national head, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He had worked for the Ford Foundation. That's how much freedom you're getting. But back to Sonia. She received an award from this particular man. Then she received another prize called the Pyne Prize, P-Y-N-E. And this is what funded her. Moses Taylor Pyne was a director of 4 banks, 8 railroads, a gas station, an insurance company, 4 steel mills, and president of the First National Bank of New York. The First National Bank of New York was one of the president of it, Vanderlip, was one of the people that went down to Jekyll Island to form the Federal Reserve. Now they're portraying her as a left-winger, and Barack is from the people. These are, he's a bankster's boy, this is a bankster's girl, but there's more on this. After that, she went to Yale, and she got the job of being the head of the journal there, the same job that Arlen Specter had, and we know that these conspirators come in handy. When he was an attorney on the Warren Commission, he was the one that came up with the 6 holes in the magic bullet that went all over the place. But that was her position. From there, she went to work for Attorney General in New York, Robert Morgenthau. Robert Morgenthau went to the 10-school organization. As I mentioned, that particular school was Deerfield, and then to Yale. His father was Henry Morgenthau, Jr., who supported Woodrow Wilson forming the Federal Reserve and the League of Nations. This is that person they're trying to portray to you out there as a left-wing radical, right from the heart of the banking establishment. It was the Morgenthau Plan that helped put together the European Union. So when you hear that she's from the left, you can see how the media is massaging this information to give you a totally different impression, and they make people on the left and on the right. The same place she came from and was groomed is the same place that John Roberts was. They color this thing in order to entertain you with this left-right crap. And again, there's some books out there that you can get the memberships list of the school.
We are united against those who are aiming their guns against us. And yes, I say, get your guns, get your ammunition, get your food, get the hell out of the damned thing that is called a dollar. Get out of it now. Do not support this or any other administration in this country who supports international terrorism. And you say, oh, we're fighting terrorism now. We're in Afghanistan. Like hell, we're in Afghanistan to free it. We're in Afghanistan to enslave it. The heroin trade is up 1,200%. It's about heroin. It's not for them to make money, they create money. It's to keep us dumb, to keep us dependent. They don't want us independent, they want us dependent. They want us on our knees. They want us enslaved. They're not for freedom, they're against it. They're not for liberty, they want tyranny. And it shouldn't be just survival that we're looking for or going towards. We should be looking at thrival rather than survival. We should thrive because we know.
It's so obvious that we've been made a target. They've deindustrialized the United States. It's so clear. You got the cap and trade. They haven't built a refinery for 30 years. They stopped building power plants. They're doing rural cleansing with their Agenda 21 across the United States. The book says, they say it, they're going to control every single solitary human act. They want to control what you buy, what you eat, what you sell, who you vote for. They say every human action. If that isn't slavery, and this is endorsed, this is Gore. Again, Arm & Hammer supported Al Gore's father. It's outrageous. It's coming. There's many things to do. You still have access to the city councils by going up there for their 3 minutes. There's newspaper tabloids that we've used in the old days that we were able to distribute and work and get that information down. You've got Frankenfed. You can reduplicate that for free to distribute that. Purchase your copy, take a look at that thing and get that out there for free. You can get stacks of these blank DVDs for 33 cents a piece. For $1,000, you can blanket the neighborhood and the precincts. That's what you've got to do now. Take advantage of your freedom now, because it's coming to a head. These guys aren't pretty. Homeland Security is it's just so obvious. Bin Laden, we're supposed to be afraid of him in a cave someplace overseas when we have multiple reports of his death.
The government will choose who is to live and who is to die, who is to be licensed to breed, and who is to be licensed to kill.
You're a human resource. In fact, the Department of Employment, the state of California is Department of Human Resources. You're a resource of the state. Let me give you this quick one here. We saw that Leon Panetta was made the CIA head. We saw that he was part of the Pew Commission with David Rockefeller, Sun Oil, advocating that the oceans be turned over to the United Nations. This was a celebration that he had for a couple of people in our community. Happened to be a man by the name of Hugh DeLacy. California legislature said he devoted virtually all of his time to the operation of Communist Front operations, spreading communist propaganda, that this person switched and followed, squirmed every bit of supporting the foreign policy of the Soviet Union. He's been in contact with Agnes Smidley, which is part of the Sorge spy ring, and Dan Bessie. And he also signs that the wife worked for the Communist Party in both Missouri and Colorado. But we don't see that in the vetting of Mr. Leon Panetta in the newspapers. But again, we've got this match with espionage, with communists, and with the people that are on the very tip of the apex. So again, that equation fits again. The communism, it's real deadly, but it's financed by the bankers.
Well, on the communist-Nazi issue, August 23rd, 1939, the Communist-Nazi Peace Pact had joined the Nazis and communists together. They invaded Poland on the left and on the right. Ben Obama and Osama bin Bush. It's the tyrants that are in control. It's not we the people. They're against we the people. The attack on the World Trade Center was known, it was welcomed. This wasn't done by some Arab. There's of the 19 so-called Arabs that were supposed to have done the job, 7 are dead. I mean, 7 are still alive, and there was one who was dead before the event. Dead men don't fly planes. Jet A fuel does not burn steel. Otherwise, no airplane could fly. Brian Hall has done a miraculous job in pulling this all together. And